We are down to 8. The tournament continues. Divisional round playoffs preview. We're making picks for all of the AFC and NFC playoff games this week on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. We see you. We love you. Hit that thumbs up button. Let us know you're stopping by. And welcome to all the new listeners as well to Peacock and Williamson as we cover the league daily throughout the playoffs, the draft, free agency, and into the 2025 season. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right. Starts to get really fun here as the playoffs whittle down and we get to see a couple of teams that are well rested and had byes this weekend in the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's start at Kansas City with the Chiefs, and this is the highest.
I'm going to throw one thing at you. I'm throwing you a curveball here because I just wanted to bring this up because it's been on my mind the last day or so since we chatted last that I know the NFL's never going to go back to a 6 game in each conference or let alone 4. I mean, 7's here to stay. They may even go to 8. But I just heard this the other day. A 7 seed has only won one playoff game ever. Like, it's pretty you mentioned how this thing gets whittled down. It's pretty obvious that the level of competition from last week to this week ramped up so dramatically, more than I can remember,
It was all blowouts last week with save the Commanders Tampa Bay game.
Yep.
None of the games were close. Even the ones you thought were going to be close were not close. It was blowouts galore. In fact, we made our picks, the ones we got right, and shout out to our listeners that are keeping track. I believe it's Grant, who's been, I think he's like in the Himalayas or something, still has some kind of internet access and has been keeping track of our picks all season long.
Love it, yeah.
The ones we got right were the ones where we picked the favorite to blow out the other team.
Yeah, and the talent gap just looked very obvious. Steelers, Ravens, Bills, Denver. Not to mention some of these teams, they kind of get that pseudo bye in week 18. The Bills didn't play anybody. You get a little bit of rest and you roll into things. So 7 seeds I'm not saying they shouldn't be in or that they're a 16 seed in March Madness, but there's a pretty big discrepancy.
That's wild that only one? That is hard to believe.
I think there's one NFL win in playoff history from a 7 seed.
From a 7
seed. And then they lost the following week, of course.
Yeah. So the only one time as a 7 seed beat the 2 seed.
I mean, it hasn't been a lot of years, but still.
Right. But still, you would think that, over the course, the parity in the NFL, that was a topic on yesterday's program. The Kansas City Chiefs are hosting the Houston Texans here, the well-rested Chiefs, and they needed it. They've been a banged-up football team, as have most teams in the NFL, once it gets to the point where you're in January. The Texans coming off a big win in the opening round of the playoffs, yet the Chiefs at home favored by 7.5 points over Houston. What do you like here with the keys? And then we'll get to our picks.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rest. I mean, I don't think the Chiefs have really played any of their dudes since like Christmas when they rolled the Steelers. So they're
rusty. They're
really
rusty.
well. They could be, but I'll take Kelsey on rest. Chris Jones has like a month rest. Mahomes didn't play in week 18, let alone last week. Andy Reid coming off a bye is legendary. And man, I was just on with Wig doing Locked On NFL. And again, I always bring things back to the Steelers. But, folks, I like to do that because I think Bears fans can then see it through their eyes. And Texans, exactly. And, I previewed Steelers Chiefs for Christmas going, wow, this team's really good. They're starting to hit their stride. And then you watch them against your team, and you're like, oh, they're even better. They're on fire right now. And then I thought the same thing with the Ravens last week. Like, oh, they're playing really, really well. And then you watch them against your team like, oh, they're even better. Like these teams are rolling.
They're in a different class. And
yeah.
They seem to always make the
hitting their
big play
stride.
when they need it. And, there's coaching and it's the Jimmies and Joes get more important and more magnified in the playoffs. And that's common, that's sort of the common idea and common thread. And you continue to see it quite a
Especially
bit.
a quarterback.
Right. But it seems like the Kansas City Chiefs, every time they need it, it's like, okay, it's not just Patrick Mahomes, although he's, makes a lot of plays late in the game and you got to go down the field and score. You got to even get in the field goal range. And third down, nope, you're covered up. Nope, he still is able to scramble, make a play, get on the move, make all these plays. And then on defense, it's like, Leo Chenal sack, right? Or this player makes a play. And then on third downs, Chris Jones just wrecks somebody. And you can always count on at least one wrecking from Chris Jones. And so it is a tall task for teams to beat the Chiefs, even when they get into position. And so the question here for us becomes not, and I think we would both pick the Kansas City Chiefs, as would most of the world, just because they're a 15-2 team and they're so battle tested and they're still in the playoffs. The question is it going to be a blowout for the Chiefs here? 7.5 points, or do you think the Texans can go in there and shock the world and get an upset?
I do think there's some matchups of note. I mean, it sounds like Mixon is highly questionable, and their run game's been a problem all year, but when he's out, it's like non-existent. That offensive line has had a lot of problems for Houston, especially with interior pressure. Rested Chris Jones and Spagnuolo lighten you up with blitzes and twists and stunts and funkiness. So I don't love that aspect of it at all. But where I do like Houston's advantage is I think Stingley can probably take away basically any receiver he's lined up on. They don't have a one. And their edge rushers against those bad tackles, to me, is really what favors Houston. Anderson and Hunter, I think, is the most important part here. And if this game was played a couple weeks ago, I would take the points. And I know Houston's coming off a nice win. And my reason for taking the points is, Kansas City wins, but they don't cover. They don't blow people out. People think they're better than they are in terms of margin of victory. Yeah, but now I have this taste in my mouth where they're back to scoring 40.
Having Pacheco back, I think, is going to be a big key in this game. The interior, and you started to lay it out because it's good on good and kind of bad on bad here. The Chiefs' interior offensive line is really good. That's where the Texans' defensive line has struggled. The Texans' edge rushers in Hunter and Anderson are awesome, and the offensive tackles for the Chiefs, that's where they have struggled. Whether it's Taylor and Humphreys, you think the veterans are a little bit more solid than the young guys in Morris and Suamataia that we've seen in and out of the lineup this year, but even the vets haven't been really good. But it still just hasn't mattered. So it's hard for me to say, man, this is the big advantage. This is where you have Stingley, who's gonna lock down Hopkins on the outside, and Lassiter's gonna do his thing, and he was big last week, even though they allowed McConkey to kind of run wild and have a whole lot of success over the middle of the field. They were able to limit any big plays in that offense, and we're able to get after the quarterback. Can they do that again against the Chiefs? I mean, it's on paper, it's possible, but in practice, the Chiefs just it hasn't mattered, even though they've had bad offensive tackle play all year long. And so it's really hard for me. And then I think on the other side of the ball, some really key advantages for the Kansas City Chiefs that we've mentioned with how good Spagnuolo is and finding pressure from everywhere against a young quarterback. I mean, I just really like the Chiefs in this one. And I think I have to give up the points, 7.5. With the way we've seen things in the playoffs.
I'm taking KC.
Reed is, I'm gonna give up the 7.5 points and take the Kansas City Chiefs in another potential blowout in the playoffs. And I hope it's not the case.
Yeah, Reed off a bye, as rested as Jones and Kelsey are, and how much they needed it. And I just think the middle of the field is going to be a problem for Houston too. And they're going to keep showing Taylor Swift after his second or third touchdown, and it could be one of those games.
And Kelsey's starting to really look like he's near the end of his career at times.
Yeah,
but when it's 3rd and 8.
He gets you 9.
I bet he has a nice couple of games here.
He has to put 3 games together and then retire off in the sunset with his blushing bride to be or whatever.
Or another Super Bowl. All right. So we're both taking the Kansas City Chiefs here, giving up 7.
I am. Yeah.
In the first game, early game Saturday of the divisional round of NFL playoffs. Plenty more to go here. We're making picks and previewing the Commanders at Lions evening Saturday game, and then a pair of Sunday matchups, which is Rams, Eagles, and the big one to end this round of playoffs, Ravens, Bills on Sunday. And I can't wait for that one. We'll get to those previews and picks next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Prize Picks. And when it comes to Prize Picks and when it comes to playoff time, if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of the football season, and that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football, want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, all you do, you simply pick more or less on player stat projections like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has you covered. We're talking about over 10 million members and billions in winnings, but you're not playing against the other members. It's just you against those stat projections, more or less on, say, Jared Goff passing yards, Saquon Barkley scoring more than one touchdown. And here's a special offer for our Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app today. Code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. Run your game. Here we go. The scrappy Washington Commanders got out of round one and into round two. I was thinking they were the 7th seed. They were actually the 6th seed, right? And it was the Packers that lost to the Eagles as the 7th seed. And I was trying to challenge your stat because I still can't believe that only one 7 seed has won a single playoff game. Man, that's wild.
I haven't fact checked that, but I heard it on a podcast yesterday, and I'm like,
entirely
that's up.
Yeah. It hasn't been a 7-team playoff field for very long.
No, and they're playing big time teams.
Right, yeah. And so the Washington Commanders are at the Detroit Lions. The Lions at home are favored by 10 points. And I hate this particular matchup for the Commanders for really one big reason, Matt, and that is their ability to stop the Lions' run game and then get Goff in 3rd and long and then pressure Goff, because that's the path to win. And that's like the Commanders are not good at that. So talk to me about how the Commanders are able to potentially upset the Detroit Lions in this one.
I'm really struggling. That again, I think a bye goes a really long way for the number 1 seed here. Let's not forget that Detroit's last bye was week 5, the earliest bye week you could possibly have. Montgomery comes back. I don't know what the status of the defense is, but I'm sure it's going to be healthier than it has been for a while. I mean, just in terms of bumps and bruises and getting people back.
I don't think anyone needed a bye more than the Detroit Lions because of how long their bye was, how banged up they were, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So that's absolutely, they needed it more than anybody, and they already looked good at the end of the season, even as tired and beat up as they had been. So I'm kind of afraid of the Detroit Lions right now.
Me too. I mean, they might just be like, oh, I just charged my batteries at the right time, and they're as aggressive as can be. And I think Washington's a wonderful story. I was telling Wig, that we were talking about the superhero quarterbacks, the Allens, the Burrows, Mahomes, Jackson, etc. And I said Daniels might be next. I mean, that's the best compliment I could even give him. Even consider that he might be next. But I also said, Commanders fans, if you lose this one by 40, you should still stand up and give your team a standing ovation for the season. And that's what I think is coming. I think it's a blowout.
The question is for me, the points, and it could absolutely be a blowout, but it might even be such an early lead that the Lions are able to just kind of lean on it. But that's also not how they operate too. So if they can go to the jugular, they're going to go for it. So I'm also giving up the points here. I'm betting on another blowout here for the Lions to defeat Washington, and they should hang their heads high. The Washington Commanders should, even if they do get blown out here in the second round of the playoffs, for what they've accomplished here in year one of a new rebuilt franchise entirely, not just coach, not just quarterback, but ownership too. So phenomenal job early in all of their tenures here for the Washington Commanders. I'm looking at the PFF grades with the Lions offense versus the Commanders defense right now. And Bobby Wagner, by the way, phenomenal season. Frankie Lou was a nice fit with the way they've worked.
Nice pickups. I think he had like 8 or 9 new starters from last year on defense.
They brought in Lattimore at the trade deadline, but speaking of Lattimore too, Sanders still has been a nice story as a rookie. He's 100%. Been one of their highest graded players in their secondary this year. But when you look at their PFF grades for the season, the Commanders defense, even the guys like Jonathan Allen and high second round pick Johnny Newton and Deron Payne, like these are big time defensive tackles where you thought, okay, the interior of the defensive line is going to be awesome. They're 88th and 82nd out of 125 defensive linemen in PFF grades, 52, really? 51, and 53. So I feel like schematically something's going on there. As good of a job as Dan Quinn's done with his coaching job, I think this year, how can three guys that talented all have nearly identical grades and all be playing worse than maybe they should? So something weird is going on there.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. And sometimes I take PFF grades with a grain of salt, but when they're all lumped like that and basically,
this plays out too with watching the game. And when I'm watching the games and I'm like, these interior guys aren't making any plays.
Yeah.
And that should be the strength of their team. Lattimore, by the way, doesn't have a very good grade either since coming over.
No, he struggled a little bit.
Yeah. So that's tough. So, and then you look at the other side.
Ragnow and Sewell. And,
right, yeah. You got Ragnow and Mahogany and Sewell and Decker, and these guys all have like bright green grades, and St. Brown and Laporta and Williams, and Goff has been phenomenal. And then you got the two-headed monster with David Montgomery practicing this week and coming back, and Gibbs is so dynamic. I mean, it's when you look at it through that lens, it even looks more like a potential blowout for
lopsided.
Yeah, and even if the Washington Commanders are able to muster some points, I just don't think they can stop the Lions' offense.
Yeah, they might be Montgomery and Gibbs combined for 4 touchdowns. One of those type of days.
Right. Gibbs. Just a really quick conversation about Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's looked phenomenal and getting more touches. It's like, oh man, give him all the touches, but it's like keep him healthy.
Yeah. Let's not burn him out.
You need him fast. So, 1A, 1B is kind of the max of, I think, where you want Jahmyr Gibbs to be, because if you get him hurt, now his dynamic ability goes away, and you start getting into the why do you draft running backs in the first round if you want to limit their touches because you don't want them to get hurt, and you start having that conversation again. So be smart. We'll worry about him being a bell cow in the future. So having Montgomery back is real nice for this football team.
Gibbs just moves so differently than most ball carriers, but don't lose 10% of that on us,
If I'm not mistaken, per touch, he leads everybody in the NFL.
I bet that's true, including Saquon and Henry, and I bet that's true.
Lower workload, but dynamic. Wow. Yeah. Next, we've got the Sunday morning game, which is the Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly is favored by 6 points. Selfishly, I kind of want to see the end of the Rams-Lions trade with Goff versus Stafford for the NFC. Selfishly, that's what I want to see happen in these playoffs. I don't know if it's in the cards, though, Matt. Can the Rams run end here against the Eagles in the divisional round?
Be pretty cool. I see where you're coming from. I think these last 2 games are the best ones and are going to be maybe historic type games.
What's the one key? And on the other side, we'll talk about more and make our actual picks for this the second NFC game here with the Rams and the Eagles. What's your one key? Let's start with the Rams side. What's the thing they have to do?
Well, I believe that they have a distinct, and we're talking playoffs, and this isn't discounting the Eagles head coach and quarterback. But you give me Stafford and McVay, I have a hard time betting against that pairing. When they have all their weapons around them on offense, I think the Eagles are the better team, and I think the Eagles can handle the Rams' defensive line, which I think is very real, is not a flash-in-the-pan, cute story, youngster type thing. But, man, I have a hard time betting when we're talking spreads against what I think is a coach and quarterback advantage.
More on that matchup, Philadelphia Eagles against the Los Angeles Rams. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's going to be the Rams in the NFC Championship game next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back at all, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can do the most that you can do in your life while your taxes are being done the most and get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So talking Rams and Eagles, I've been so impressed with the young rebuilt Rams defensive line, and they've kind of been 4 for 4 on a first rounder in Verse, second rounder in Braden Fisk. You had a couple of third rounders, right? In Byron Young, this other speed guy coming off the edge, which is a nice compliment to Verse. Kobe Turner's been phenomenal. But one thing that really struck me with those guys, and it's something to remember and put a pin on when we're doing draft evaluations, because you get enamored with athleticism and who's got this kind of hand usage and arm length and all these things. These guys play like maniacs.
They do.
I love watching Jared Verse play, man. His speed to power, his bull rush is already amongst one of the best in the entire NFL. He was a top 10 graded defensive end in the league as a rookie. He was 9th out of 118 according to Pro Football Focus. And he's flying around that snooka splash where he's just like literally off the ground, Superman dive, flying around on the field. And so he's an animal.
He's a bully, yeah.
The problem is the Eagles are well equipped to thwart that one thing that they do well on defense and lean on them. And then you can start to, like, Keller Weatherspoon played the game of his life last week. Is he going to lock up A.J. Brown this week? You got Devontae Smith. It's just too much on offense from the Eagles against those Los Angeles Rams. And the question is, can they make up for it on the other side with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay? Maybe they can keep it a little bit closer, but I have my doubts here. I think the Rams run does end here. But, man, when you have that good of a quarterback coach combination and you've got some studs on your defensive line, it gives you a shot. And we've seen the Rams retool and rebuild on the fly and are a much better team than I thought they were coming into the year. And in fact, they've been one of the better teams in the NFL since about week 5 when we thought they were going to blow the whole thing up.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the Eagles, but I do have some Hurts concerns. I'm talking about against the Mahomeses and Staffords and, the big time final 8, final 4 type of, matchups. Real quick on that D line from the Rams, like those Florida State dudes played that way at Florida State. I mean, that's who they are. I mean, they're nasty MFers, but I love what Mike Lombardi says about defensive line coaches. He's like, they're just lion tamers. You just give them these vicious animals and just try to at least point them in the right direction. And whoever's the D line coach for the Rams is doing a heck of a job because he is taming the Lions. I'm going to take the Rams plus the points, though. I think this is going to go down as a really good game. I think Stafford keeps it close. I have great respect for the Eagles defense. Don't get me wrong. But I do think a huge matchup is, I think Lane Johnson and Mulata and those guys can handle that front enough.
And then you look on the other side of the ball. It's like, okay, go outscore them. And man, speaking of lit up like a Christmas tree, there's nobody on the Eagles defense. And Vic Fangio has coached these dudes up, utilized different skill sets, Zach Bond and Cooper DeJean as a rookie, and Quinyon Mitchell's been awesome as a rookie. And then you got Darius Slay on the other side, and then the defensive line, which is really talented with Carter and Sweat. And Gardner Johnson is always a thorn in offensive sides. Like nobody's got they're all lit up green. Every 11 starters in the nickel for the Eagles defense is lit up green as far as 70 plus grades at PFF, even the rookies. And in fact, the rookies have been really awesome in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. So
Dean is out, but other than that, they're pretty loaded. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So phenomenal group there. Like the matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles here. And as good as Stafford is, is he just going to, and it's a tough ask, right? Like you'll see Stafford just boom, boom, boom over and over. But then what happens is, okay, now Stafford, we really got to go make something happen. And then he throws that interception, that Stafford interception. And I think that
could be it
for the Rams as they try to come back in this game. And the Eagles are just a better team and more fortified and more prepared than the Rams' last opponent to knock them out of the playoffs. 6 points. Yep, I made the mistake last week of underrating the Eagles. I'm going to take another blowout here potentially and give up the 6 points and take the Eagles.
I get it. I'm going to take the points.
Matt's taking the points. The first one we disagree on. What about the Sunday eveninger? Well, it's kind of the afternooner for me, more evening for you guys on the East Coast. Can't wait for this one. And it's the closest line. Should be the best game of the weekend. The Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. Baltimore on the road, favored by one singular point, man.
I got this one, Baltimore plus 1.5 is what it opened at. And I thought that was not the correct line. And I think the Ravens win, and I will lay the point. I'm gladly taking the 1.5. I expect a phenomenal football game. And I should have led with this on the podcast. I really hope, even if Lamar or Allen throws 4 picks and takes 10 sacks, that I'm not hearing on Monday, he ain't what he used to be. Can't win in the playoffs. That guy,
Yeah.
Right. Like, come on, man.
You might as well have Sam Darnold because Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson can't win in the playoffs.
Overrated.
Yeah.
The guy's no good. Yeah, I've seen enough for both that I don't care what they do in this game, but I bet they're both awesome. Henry's postseason numbers are insane. And rarely do I kind of lean on a back to make my decision here.
Mm-hmm.
But in weather against a team that plays a lot of nickel, the Steelers made a terrible mistake and played a lot of nickel against Baltimore, and that's where all their yardage allowed came from. I hope the Bills learn from it, but that's not what they are. I just think the Bills' D is a little soft for this matchup. Of the 4 units, they're the one that's a little finesse, a little bit soft, and to me, that could be the undoing.
And it's going to be cold.
Yeah.
Buffalo. I don't think that hurts the Ravens.
I think there'll be snow.
And in some ways it could help, but is it going to be is it going to be like a snow shootout, or does the game get weird is my question here.
Yeah.
And that could be beneficial to the Buffalo Bills just for things to be a little bit weird on their own home turf in a game that could be pretty close because, maybe and look, Lamar can throw the ball really well, but in that sort of environment,
no one's better than Allen.
Maybe you give the advantage to Allen. He's the best in the NFL at that particular thing. And I do like the Bills' offensive line, so it would be a really interesting shootout game. But if it's really cold and snowing, does that negate the shootout part of things? And then you kind of swing back to Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and be able to make him plays on the ground. And I just think of Josh Allen and the way his seasons have ended. And I talked about his 2021 where they had that crazy 45-42 game with whoever had the ball last was going to win the game with Allen and Mahomes in the playoffs. And he had a 9-0 touchdown to interception ratio in 2 games in that playoff. And then he gets knocked out by, Burrow or Mahomes. And then this year it's like, okay, now we've got the other guy you were battling with MVP. He wins the MVP and then he knocks you out. It's like, Josh Allen just keeps he plays amazing in the playoffs and gets knocked out by all these other great quarterbacks and great.
It's remarkable.
It's a juggernaut in the AFC, but I do have to side with the Ravens here. And it's pretty close to a pick 'em still. 1 point for Baltimore. I'll give up that point and I'll take the Baltimore Ravens, but maybe snow could help Josh Allen a little bit in that he could power through it in sort of a shootout variety, because I do think both offenses will be able to move the ball on both defenses.
Yeah, I don't think anyone throws the ball in elements better than Allen, to your point. So that's not a knock on Lamar, but even if they're playing Mahomes, snow might help Buffalo's passing game more than the Ravens' passing game.
But it might help the Ravens' running game more.
Yeah, that's exactly what
it is. Lamar Jackson out there running around like it's turf, while the Buffalo defenders are running like it's in snow, because that could be factors.
And Henry,
obviously.
And Henry.
Right.
Yeah. I think the Ravens are in a really good spot. I'm going to take them in this game.
All right. We both got Ravens. We both got Lions. We both got Chiefs. I have the Eagles. Matt's taken the Rams with 6 points on Sunday. And that is the slate of divisional round playoff games. Can't wait. It's going to be some really good ones. Let us know what you think at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Stop by the YouTube chat. Get your questions in for next week's mailbag. Subscribe while you're there. And Matt and I will be back Monday to break it all down right here. Peacock and Williamson.
Awesome.